Coming up now in your spoiler-free wrestling news rundown, we've got the television ratings for all the top pro wrestling shows. Both Raven and Ric Flair have issued statements regarding the Dark Side of the Ring episode on Canyon, and Bullet Club in Impact Wrestling has gained a new member. All that and more on your spoiler-free wrestling news rundown. This is just a reminder that we omit any news or information which could potentially spoil the results, angles, storylines, or surprise debuts taking place in professional wrestling. If you appreciate this type of wrestling coverage, please consider subscribing, clicking the notifications bell, and sharing this video with friends. Taking a look at the television ratings for all the major pro wrestling shows in the United States right now, we'll start with Smackdown, which continues to be the most watched pro wrestling program in the United States. The episode it did on September 17th, last one that we have, brought in 2,243,000 viewers and a 0.58 in the key demographic. That is down a little bit from what they have been doing. However, SmackDown continues to keep its viewership strong. The second most watched television program, pro wrestling television program in the United States is WWE Raw, and it beat Dynamite in the key demographic this week, something it didn't do the week before. So even going up against Monday Night Football this week, Raw brought in 1,793,000 viewers and a 0.49 in the key demographic. As for AEW, the ratings were up a little bit for Grand Slam Dynamite this week. Of course, this was the big show with Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega kicking things off, and Ruby Soho and Britt Baker in the main event. So they brought in 1,273,000 viewers for this show and a 0.48 in the key demographic. So both of those are up from the previous week when it actually defeated Raw in the key demographic. The September 15th episode of Dynamite brought in a 0.44 in the key demographic, and the WWE Raw on September 13th brought in a 0.43. However, this week, Raw back up ahead of Dynamite in the key demographic, and Raw also continues to have about 500,000 more viewers, total viewers, than Dynamite, although not in the key demographic. As for AEW Rampage, the episode on September 17th last week did 642,000 viewers and a 0.28 in the key demographic. So it seems to be kind of hovering around the 600,000 to 700,000 mark, except for that big August 20th episode, which featured the return of CM Punk. Then underneath Rampage, we have NXT actually does more total viewers than Rampage, but scores lower in the 18 to 49 demographic. So this week's episode on September 21st brought in 746,000 viewers and a 0.2 in the key demographic. So more viewers than Rampage, but less of them in the key demographic. As for Impact Wrestling, those previous ratings had been courtesy of ITN, WWE.com. Impact Wrestling's ratings, these are from Fightful, and you can see up on your screen now, the September 17th episode brought in 105,000 viewers, and that's a little bit lower than what they'd done in their previous two episodes. So they do sort of hover around that 100,000 to 120, 130,000 viewers. That is Impact's viewership currently. And that's your ratings news for this week. A new episode of Dark Side of the Ring aired last night, and this week's episode focused on the life and career of Chris Kanyon. Well, for the second week in a row, Ric Flair has issued a statement regarding comments about him made on the episode. So the episode included clips of Chris Kanyon appearing on the Howard Stern show in 2006. And on that show, Kanyon stated his belief that he had been fired from WWE due to his sexuality. Ric Flair actually called into the show and stated his belief that the reason Kanyon had been let go from WWE was that he was not good enough. It was also mentioned on the Dark Side of the Ring episode that this incident hurt Kanyon. This was something that bothered him, as Flair was someone that he looked up to in the business. Ric Flair issued a statement through social media an hour before the episode aired on Vice. Flair wrote, "Breaks my heart to hear later on that he took this so hard. Calling into guests that were seen as hostile to WWE was part of the job then. I should not have said that nobody had ever been released. There's no way I could have known for sure." Flair continued, "I was holding the company line. Love is love is love is love, and everyone should be able to love whoever and however they choose without fear of reprisal. I wasn't a huge Kanyon fan as a worker, but Chris Kluseritz was a hell of a good guy." Another wrestler who has commented on last night's episode of Dark Side of the Ring on Kanyon is one of Kanyon's biggest rivals in the ring, an ally of his in the ring, and a good friend of his behind the scenes, and that is Raven. The Dark Side of the Ring episode featured interviews with Diamond Dallas Page, James Mitchell, Brian Cage, and the Young Bucks, but no Raven. Raven took to social media to respond to people who were asking him why he was not a part of the show. Raven wrote, "For those who are wondering, I was not contacted to be part of Kanyon's Dark Side of the Ring episode. Yeah, I'm as puzzled as anyone else, why not? Our friendship had a lot of depth to it, and I feel like I would have had quite a bit to contribute, unique to my perspective." Bullet Club in Impact Wrestling grew by a new member this week as El Phantasmo returned to the promotion. He had taken part in a set of tapings for Impact Wrestling earlier this year as well, with those matches having aired in May. But he returned on this week's show to help Chris Bay and Hikuleo beat down the members of Finjuice. This all happened after David Finlay had picked up a victory over Hikuleo. This comes after Hikuleo had two big victories over Finjuice members last weekend. He defeated Juice Robinson in a tables match on New Japan Strong, and him and Chris Bay defeated Finjuice at Impact's Victory Road. So it definitely looks like Bullet Club in Impact Wrestling is going to be a continuing thing. They are adding members. They now have Hikuleo, Chris Bay, and El Phantasmo. Who knows if we'll see Jay White back in the promotion as well. As for other Bullet Club members, such as Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, they continue to compete in the G1 Climax tournament. We will have more updates on how they are doing after the weekend. This week's edition of AEW Dynamite opened up with AEW World Champion Kenny Omega and the debuting Bryan Danielson going to a time limit draw. Both Omega and Danielson released statements after the match, and here is what Kenny Omega had to say. Omega, channeling some influence from the Rocky movies, tweeted out, "Ain't gonna be no rematch." So Kenny Omega, it appears, is not willing to give Danielson a rematch, and certainly not going to put his title on the line. Meanwhile, Bryan Danielson tweeted out this smiling photo of himself, along with the words, "When you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Thank you to the incredible fans in New York last night. Thank you to AEW and its wrestlers for putting in the work to make last night possible." So what does the future hold for these two after going to a time limit draw on Grand Slam Dynamite? Former IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion, former booker of Ring of Honor, Marty Squirrel, has announced a return to professional wrestling. Squirrel has not wrestled since before the pandemic. Of course, then in the summer of 2020, Squirrel had numerous allegations made about him as part of the Speaking Out movement. He later departed from Ring of Honor due to these allegations. Well, he is going to be appearing for CWA in Puerto Rico on October 23rd at the Halloween Fan Fest. And he just writes Puerto Rico next month. And people like Matt Cardona, Pro Wrestling Tees, Tessa Blanchard, AAA, other places commenting on Marty Squirrel's potential return to professional wrestling. Well, I thought this was interesting. Chris Jericho was being interviewed by Stephanie Chase recently when he mentioned that he had pitched to Tony Khan that the Inner Circle be broken up. Now, the Inner Circle faction formed on the very first episode of Dynamite on October 2nd, 2019, and have been a focal part of the promotion ever since. Apparently, Jericho felt that it was time for all the members to go their separate ways, but Tony Khan responded with, well, why don't you go your separate ways, but you still be a unit? So this is what Jericho said on the show. Jericho said, my idea was for us to respectfully disband and go on our own ways. Tony didn't want to do that. He said, why would you want to disband? You don't have to be together all the time, but you're still the Inner Circle. Jericho continued, after this year, the whole storyline was based around MJF wanting to join. Wardlow is in the Inner Circle, the Pinnacle, 5-on-5, that sort of thing. It was a well-told year-long story with the 5 of us. It's good for us to go on our own ways and not be in each other's business every week. It's good that we're still aligned. For me, I thought it was a good time for us to go on our own way, but we can still do that without officially disbanding the band or breaking up the band. A special 2-hour edition of AEW Rampage will air tonight. This was taped Wednesday night from Arthur Ashe Stadium after Dynamite concluded. 6 matches are scheduled to take place, 5 of them official, and 1 of them a lights-out match. Here is what AEW has scheduled for tonight's show. CM Punk will take on Powerhouse Hobbs. Christian Cage will team with Jurassic Express to go up against Adam Cole and the Young Bucks. The Men of the Year, Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky, managed by Dan Lambert, will take on Chris Jericho and Jake Hager. Santana and Ortiz will team up with the Lucha Bros and take on the Hardy Family Office. Penelope Ford will take on Anna Jay, and in a lights-out match, Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley will take on Suzuki Goons, Lance Archer, and Minoru Suzuki. WWE presents Smackdown tonight from the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They have 2 matches and 1 segment announced for the show. For the Intercontinental Championship, King Shinsuke Nakamura will defend against Apollo Crews. In the other announced match, Liv Morgan will take on Zelina Vega, and the debut of Happy Corbin's talk show, Happy Talk, will take place tonight. Then on Sunday, WWE will present Extreme Rules from the Nationwide Arena in Columbus, Ohio. Here is what they've got announced for the show. Liv Morgan will take on Carmella in singles action. For the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, the Usos will defend against the Street Profits. For the United States Championship, Damian Priest will defend against both Sheamus and Jeff Hardy in a triple threat match. For the SmackDown Women's Championship, Becky Lynch will defend against Bianca Belair. For the Raw Women's Championship, Charlotte Flair will defend against Alexa Bliss, who will be in front of her hometown crowd in Columbus. And in the main event for the Universal Championship, Roman Reigns will defend against the Demon Finn Balor in an Extreme Rules match. And with that, you are completely up to date with everything that's making headlines in the world of professional wrestling, minus anything which could potentially spoil future storylines, match results, angles, or surprise debuts for you. I'm your host, Gentleman Ian, for Spoiler Free Wrestling.